Hey, what's up? My name is Benson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I write songs, I record music, I do photography and review old cameras, and one of the things that I've been posting most is my journey to becoming a tattoo artist. So that's something that has been a dream of mine for a few years now, and I've been slowly working on it as much as my free time has allowed. So this year I thought I would make a video series as I explore the various styles of tattoo art that interest me. One of the biggest challenges for me in pursuing this goal has been trying to figure out what style I'm even interested in. Most of the videos that I've posted so far have been me trying to draw American traditional tattoo designs or classic or sailor tattoo designs, which is a style that I'm definitely passionate about and I love learning about. So definitely check out those videos if you're interested in that. But I wanted to take a little bit of a detour and venture into the world of realism tattoo art, because that is a style that has always been near the top of my list of things that I could really see myself enjoying doing. I have tried dabbling in realism a little bit in the past. I've learned something since then that has really helped me out. If you want to learn a skill, you should try and really niche down on what it is that you want to improve at within that skill. Taking a blank piece of paper and being like, I'm going to practice drawing a portrait today. The thing that you run into is that you're trying to solve so many problems that are all new to you at the same time. You're wrestling with proportion, trying to figure out how big is this eye? Is it too far to the right? Is the mouth crooked? Have I got the jawline right? You might get kind of wrapped up in things like the Loomis method and going down a YouTube rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to draw proportions. And that is definitely a valuable skill to have, but it's not something that is as applicable to actual realism tattooing as you might think, because most realism tattooists, well, pretty much all of them, use stencils. They are a very significant crutch that is helpful. They can take away a lot of that cognitive load that comes with trying to figure out proportions. So if you use a stencil and you're doing black and gray realism, which is what I'm particularly interested in, and the only thing that you really have to concern yourself with is value. So value refers to the range of light and dark, all the way from pure black to pure white and all of the various gray tones in between. Figuring out exactly how light and dark a specific area of a reference image is like the biggest challenge to contend with and get really good at. What I've done is I've created an exercise for myself that will help me get better at seeing value specifically. How am I going to do that? Well, the first thing is I'm going to practice seeing value. And that's harder than you might think. The brain likes to play a lot of tricks on you when you're looking at an image. Even if the image is already in black and gray, you've probably seen optical illusions before in which there are two shades of gray in various parts of an image that are the exact same value. They are equally dark, but one looks significantly darker than the other one because the one that's on a white background appears to be much darker than the gray patch that's on a black background. You can't trust your brain, and it's a lot harder than it might sound to try and unlearn some of these things. Over the past few weeks, I've been looking high and low for an app that would help me practice seeing value. And I found one that works pretty well for me. It's called Values at Play. I think it costs like maybe $5 or a little less than that. I'll pull it up on my phone for you and show you. It's a little app that has 4 different kind of modes in it, but the one that I enjoy is the bottom one, which is called Values Tic-Tac-Toe. Here I've loaded a reference image by one of my favorite tattoo artists, Inal Bursakov. He's most famous for doing the owl on Drake's chest, but he is a micro-realism portrait artist who does an incredible job of interpreting value. So I thought I would import a few of his tattoos that I really like. This is one of Yoda and Luke Skywalker, just to show you how the app works. So it's supposed to be like a game of tic-tac-toe. At the bottom you have a 3x3 grid, but what's different from normal tic-tac-toe is that each one has a different gray value in it. So at the top you have 3 lighter tones, which you can think of as your highlights. In the middle you have your 3 medium tones, which you can think of as mid-tones. And at the bottom you have 3 different dark tones or shadow tones or values. It's actually really helpful, I think, to mentally group things into these 3 categories. It's either very close to black or very close to white or something in the middle. Then within that, it's also helpful to subdivide into 3. So if it's close to black, is it pure black, significantly lighter than black, or is it something near black but not quite? That's actually really helpful. Dividing things into this 9 square grid is a really helpful way to see value. The way the app is supposed to be used is that you pick a square that you want to put your O in. I think you always place O's. You move the cursor around to somewhere in that image, like if I want Luke's shirt start there, you can kind of see there's a red circle, and I think that's a light midtone, so I'm clicking it, and I was right. So it's placed an O in there, and you go on like that, playing X's and O's. The way that I like to use it really is just actually randomly moving the cursor somewhere on the screen. Just move it somewhere, and then I'll look at it, and I'll try and think, what value is that? Test myself, and just basically use this as a way of quizzing my ability to see value accurately. Even better, if you don't use the cursor at first, and you just mentally pick a little tiny patch on the drawing. I'm like, what is Yoda's left eyelid right in the middle there? What value is that? And I lock it in. I think it's a dark highlight, and then I move the cursor there, and it's a little bit easier once the cursor is there because it kind of isolates it in the middle for you to look at, which is a little bit easier. And I click it, and I was wrong. I was one square off. It was actually a light midtone. So that's just a helpful little tool that I wanted to share with you guys. Again, I'm not associated with the app. In the future, maybe I'll take on learning how to build something like this and actually create a tool that's more specific to the task of practicing seeing value. But for now, that's the best thing that I could find. Definitely comment below if you have other suggestions of tools that could be helpful for practicing this. I know that one way people do it is just cutting a little hole in a piece of paper and sliding that around a printout of a black and gray image and practicing basically checking the value that way, like in an analog version. Anyway, I'm just going to go grab my dog because she's barking. I'll be right back. All right, Luna is joining me now. I don't know if she likes being on camera. Do you have anything to say to people? She's not much of a talker. The second exercise, let me just put her down. So I'm going to basically try and recreate the feeling of tattooing using a stencil, but using just pen and paper. Or in my case, I'm going to use Procreate on my iPad. Now, there are a few things that I'm going to do to make this a little bit more accurate than just drawing on my iPad the way that I normally would. One is that I'm not going to let myself zoom in and out at all. So in the past, whenever I've tried to draw, portraits and such, I've allowed myself to zoom in and add details to the eyes and then zoom out and shade the cheek and then, move the image around a bunch. Obviously, you can't zoom in and out on a real tattoo. On paper, you don't have to worry about this. So if you're doing it on paper, that's fine. But that is the first thing. The thing that's a little bit frustrating with Procreate is that there is no zoom slider or way to lock the zoom. But what you can do as a little shortcut is you can add an actual shortcut where you hold down on the screen. You can do this under the gesture controls menu, and this isn't meant to be a tutorial on that, but you can add actual size as one of your shortcuts, and it will snap the image to a predetermined size based on the ratio that you've initially set the canvas at. So if that sounds confusing, you can look it up. But there is a way of consistently having your Procreate drawing be the same size, even if you're rotating it and moving it around the screen. You can always just hit actual size again and it'll reset. That's the first limitation. The second thing that I did for this exercise is I didn't allow myself to erase. I say that, but in practice, I actually kind of did, because what I did was I had 9 different values of gray loaded up, and the way that this particular pencil brush that I was using worked is that it did allow you to lighten the value. If you shaded something in black and then you took a light gray, you could slowly lighten that black by adding gray, and that's not how tattoo ink works. With tattoos, you can only make things darker generally. You can use white ink, and white ink can lighten things a little bit, but that's really mostly just for like pure white highlights. It's not like you can just keep mixing like the way with paint, where you can keep adding layers and actually lighten things that were previously dark. With tattooing, even if you're using a light dilution, it's going to darken the skin. I tried my best to adhere to that as much as I could, but at the same time, I didn't have the discipline to not try and correct a few mistakes that I made along the way. So I didn't erase anything per se, but I did sometimes lighten areas that you wouldn't be able to lighten if this was a real tattoo. Needless to say, the more disciplined you are with yourself, then the more you will get from the exercise. So the third thing that I did is I used a stencil using this tattoo stencil app that I have. Again, not associated with that app either, but it's a great, easy app that you can do. If you are using Procreate, there's another way that you can easily create a stencil automatically. You can look that up using like a Gaussian blur and using 2 layers. Look up how to do that if you don't know. But anyway, create a tattoo stencil. I'm going to turn it purple because that's typically the color that actual stencils are. And then I'm going to use some different pencil brushes that I have. So that's kind of the whole point of this exercise, taking the cognitive load of all of the different things that go into a drawing and trying to isolate it down to the parts that are most pertinent to actually tattooing, seeing value. And if you think about a realism tattoo as just a series of gray blotches, it's a lot less intimidating. When you look at a person's face, you're like, how do I even start to draw this? But when you actually just break it down into little tiny patches of light gray and slightly lighter gray and slightly darker gray, pure black here and pure white there, or pure skin tone depending on what the person's skin tone is, negative space. That makes it a lot less discouraging and overwhelming. That's kind of the frame of mind that I did have doing this exercise. And the last thing that I'll quickly mention as well, I let myself rotate the image, and at the end I even flipped the image. In real life you wouldn't really be able to do that. I mean, you could use a mirror, maybe you could use VR goggles and somehow program it to flip what you're seeing. That would not be helpful when you're tattooing. That'd be like one of those carnival bikes where the handlebar is like flipped, so you steer left and the wheel goes right. Anyway, I did let myself do that because I think it's good to check your work, and one of the best ways to check your work when you're doing this is to flip the image or turn it upside down or look at it in some way that makes your brain see shapes rather than actual facial features like an eye or a mouth. So if you can view it as like a more abstract thing, then you can be more objective about it. And that's one of the tips that's from a very famous drawing book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. That's a book that you can find at like any thrift store. I bought it a long time ago for like $2 at a thrift store. And that's one of the exercises that I found helpful, was like drawing a portrait, but looking at your reference upside down the whole time, so that you're really focusing on what you're actually seeing and not so much how your brain symbolizes things. Anyway, it's a bit of a tangent, but I want to put as much value into these videos as I can. So let's jump into my view in Procreate and dive into a time lapse of me drawing this portrait. This is a Pinterest board that I've had for a few years. I love using Pinterest for just finding references, and what I'm looking for is some interesting lighting, especially. I mean, interesting textures and facial expressions are great too. The angle of her face here is a little bit interesting. She's like, her neck is kind of curved and her head's looking up a little bit, and the lighting is coming from the top right, her top right. So one of the main things that I would advise for, if you're new to drawing, if you're new to this like me, this is actually only, I think, the third drawing I've ever like fully rendered. I'm just not good at sticking with things, but I've only done a handful of portraits drawing before, realism drawings. But one thing that I do know is very helpful for beginners is having a lot of contrast in your reference image. So if there's not a lot of contrast, then it's a very flat image, meaning all of the tones are very close together, and so they're more compressed together, which means that it's a lot more subtlety in delineating, one shade compared to another one. Whereas with this, you have the full spectrum of light. The right half of her face, and I'm referring to her right and left, by the way, not ours. The right half of her face has a lot of highlights. It's a nice roll off. It's a nice soft light. Her hair is very dark, and then she's got some very close to black shadows on the left side of her face and ear. So that just makes it easier to create something with a little bit of structure and three-dimensionality. I found that one of the hardest parts of this drawing, which kind of surprised me, is the light areas, like her forehead, where the light is hitting it. To be able to express those very subtle differences in tones between like very bright white and then slightly off white and slightly light gray, it's very, very tricky, especially using like a pencil brush like this that isn't super easy to blend. I didn't think that those subtle differences were going to be that important, but when you have like a big open space like that, you do need to give it a sense of roundness and dimension, and the only way you have to do that is try to represent it the way that it's in the photo. And so they're very, very subtle changes and shapes there, and it's easy to overemphasize them. That's one thing that I learned, is like trying to get the actual, well, that's what the whole exercise is, isn't it? It's about trying to get values accurately. And when you use a stencil, it's very forgiving. Like when you look at the final drawing, you're like, wow, that's pretty good. Like it looks like her, but actually a lot of that is because the proportion was already taken care of with the stencil. So it's a lot more forgiving than trying to freehand a drawing as far as likeness goes. So you have to really be self-critical to be able to actually evaluate whether or not you've done a good job of representing the values. And at the same time, don't be too critical. Be proud of yourself, because you've definitely learned something. I know I learned a lot from doing this exercise, but when I look at it, I can tell it's a drawing and not a photograph. And I'm talking about the final thing when I'm done. I put it on my couch and just kind of took a few steps back. And I'm like, is it still clear that this is a drawing? And it was, and I had to stand maybe like 10 or 15 feet away before I couldn't really tell whether it was a photo or a drawing. So to me, that means that clearly it's not easy to accurately represent the values and accurately represent the textures as well. The brushes I used here were a pencil and a charcoal brush. Obviously, this is on my iPad, so they're digital versions of these things. And one of the things that I did find very challenging as well was getting a smoothness, trying to blend and create that nice light roll off. Now, one thing that is helpful is using various different colors, like different tones. Sometimes I would be using a pure black and then pressing lightly to get a lighter tone, or I would just use a lighter shade of gray. So striking that balance was new to me, and it's something similar that you have to contend with using different ink dilutions with tattooing. But one thing that I was very strict about was not zooming in or out. So I found it a little bit frustrating that the minimum size of the pencil brush wasn't really small enough to capture a lot of the fine details like the eyelashes and such. But that's just how it is, right? Like it's better to work within those limitations and try to navigate them than to cheat and zoom in and such. Obviously, I could make the brush smaller. There is a limitation based on the pixels, and I didn't want to mess with being able to snap it to the actual size by using a bigger canvas and then shrinking it. Anyway, that's getting a little bit technical. Let me look at my notes here and see what other tips that I have. A few other thoughts. So one helpful exercise for seeing value that some people recommended was to actually start with a black canvas and then use lighter inks so that everything is pure black when you start and then you're actually just lightening. Or alternatively, you could use a gray or tan colored or flesh toned canvas, and then you're using both lighter and darker values than the background to both raise and lower different areas of the canvas in terms of brightness. So that's a good way to work. One way to check your work when you're actually tattooing or drawing not digitally, in other words, where you can't just like flip the image, is to take a photograph of it. I know that my tattoo mentor likes to take photos before he says he's done. He'll take a few photos and just look at them because it just gives you kind of a fresh reset where you can more objectively analyze what is still requiring a little bit of touching up. And so that's a good tip there. And one thing I wanted to say about tattoo artists as well is I think regardless of the genre or style, what makes a really good artist stand out is their ability to summarize a design. So knowing what to leave in and what to omit. And when you look at a lot of realism artists, even if they say they're photorealism artists, I think they will tend to summarize or I don't know what's another good word for it. They will try to kind of minimize the complexity of certain areas in order to be able to, execute the design within the given time frame and budget, and still be able to create a likeness that satisfies the client. So areas that you can't take shortcuts on are typically like the eyes, where people tend to focus first, and then the mouth and the nose, people focus there, and the overall silhouette. But areas like the hair are very forgiving because people's hair changes all the time, moment to moment, depending on how it falls or how the wind is blowing. So you can be a little bit more flexible. At the same time, conversely, I would say that you don't want to take shortcuts, and like the drawing is really only as good as its weakest element, right? So it's finding that balance, and really experienced artists, I find, are great at simplifying. So I wanted to put that in there. Speaking of hair, that was a real challenge for me. This is my first time actually drawing hair. Like, I always tend to skip that part because I just hate the idea of it. And so what I did is I basically filled in most of the hair, like whatever the lightest value was. I actually kept the highlights in the hair brighter than the actual reference image, which I shouldn't have really done, but it did allow for a little bit more like texture, and it's challenging to do hair, and I just trusted the stencil and did my best with it. And this hair has a lot of really great texture in it. I think it actually turned out pretty cool, but hair is definitely a pain. It's no different from the rest of the drawing, I guess, was my takeaway there. You just look at the various tones and shapes, and you look for the different blotches, and you just fill them in. Taking breaks is a good piece of advice.
it was tough for me because on one hand, I wanted to take breaks, but I also didn't want to lose momentum because this felt like a real marathon to stick with it. I kept being like, oh, is it over yet? This is taking so long. And one thing to be mindful of is ergonomics, and you don't want to get carpal tunnel. You don't want to hurt your back more than you have to. So just be mentally aware of how tightly you're gripping things. I know I get wrist pain from poor posture and not doing a great job of keeping my grip relaxed. So that was something that I learned from this. Let me see, what else do I have here? Yes, a note on procrastination. So one revelation I had that was actually a really helpful mindset shift for me was that the reason that I'm procrastinating and not wanting to draw in the first place and just putting it off is because I don't want to confront my own limitations. So you might relate to that. I think, in other words, we don't want to work on things because we're afraid that we'll be disappointed in how they turn out. And naturally, our minds like to protect us from feeling those things and being hard on ourselves. So now that I recognize it, it doesn't necessarily make it a whole lot easier for me to work on things, but having that knowledge of, hey, the reason why I don't want to pick up the pencil today is because I'm afraid that I'm going to be disappointed in myself when it's done and not, satisfied with the end result. And I just want to avoid that whole experience. And if you can rationalize and tell yourself, hey, I'm actually only going to get better, even if in the short term it feels like I'm not living up to my own expectations, knowing that objectively every time you work on something, you gain knowledge, you gain skills, you gain muscle memory, you just improve as an artist. That is a very motivating thing that can help combat that procrastination that I think a lot of us, myself especially, struggles with. So I hope that's helpful for you and encouraging, and that's kind of the vibe that I want my videos to have. A few other notes that I'll quickly make is just contrasting this exercise to tattooing. Obviously with tattooing, you have to be aware of a number of things. You have to worry about the stencil smudging, the skin getting irritated and bleeding, and you have to worry about the pain that you're causing the client. So something like this is a lot easier because you can jump around as much as you want, whereas tattooing, you have so many human variables that play into things, and that's just one of the things to keep in mind. But at the same time, what I realized is that the value of this exercise is not so much in emulating the act of tattooing. I mean, using a fake skin is a little bit better for that, but the real value here is practicing value, practicing perseverance, the discipline to stick with something and see it out, and to be kind of self-aware of what challenges that you encounter along the way, what's easy for you, what's hard for you, what do you enjoy. And that's why I'm doing this, is to learn about myself, to improve as an artist, and to try and figure out what direction do I want to go in. And I think the best way to figure that out is just to try new things, put yourself out there.
All right, so that's my realism portrait, and there are a number of things that I took away from this exercise. The first one is how much patience it takes to do this style. This took me 6 hours. Luckily, my memory card actually had enough storage for 6.5 hours. I had 1 minute remaining when I decided to wrap it up, which was kind of a good thing because I probably would have just kept working on it otherwise. I'm not perfectly happy with it, but at the same time, I'm learning, and you got to put yourself out there a little bit. This is the best I can do right now. In the future, hopefully I can do better, but I am actually pretty happy with a lot of elements of it. It looks a little bit sketchy. I struggled a lot with trying to create like a smoothness to it, and I didn't let myself use like the smudging brush, which would have helped a lot with that, since you can't use a smudging brush when you're doing a tattoo. It's not a perfect replica of what doing a tattoo is like. I would struggle a lot more if I was actually under those limitations. But anyway, the main thing I learned was how much patience it takes. Realist tattoo artists do tend to spend 6.5 hours. I think most sessions for like a hand-sized portrait are usually like a full day session, 6 to 8 hours or so. I can't imagine doing this in one sitting because I had a hard time staying focused for like 1 or 2 hours at a time. So it gave me a huge appreciation for the amount of focus and perseverance that it takes to do something like that. It is definitely exhausting when this is a new skill and these mental muscles aren't really used to being used in that way. So I think it would get easier with time, but I definitely have a huge amount of appreciation, and I can understand why realism tattoo artists charge what they sometimes do charge. I think part of that at least has to do with the public's perception of what is and isn't impressive or requiring talent. And I think it's slightly a misconception that tattooing realism requires more talent than any other style. It is just a specific set of skills, and it does take a long time to develop. So having said all that, is it something that I could see myself doing in the future? I think it is a really rewarding style. You know, when you finish a realism drawing, it makes you feel good. It's like there's a sense of accomplishment there. Part of that is because, again, people tend to think that it's like impressive to do realism. Maybe a lot less so when you're tracing it like I did in this. I wouldn't be able to do nearly as good a job if I was doing it completely freehand. It is a style of tattooing that allows for some meaningful work. You know, sometimes people get a memorial tattoo of someone's face who passed away. That's a lot of pressure on one hand, but on the other hand, it's something that is clearly very important and meaningful. But it definitely brought into question, do I have the patience and perseverance to be able to do this? And is it something that I would enjoy doing day in and day out? I think in general, realism is a little bit less expressive and creative than a lot of illustrative styles of tattooing. It leans more towards the craft side of things, which is mastering a skill over many years that you can then offer as a service for others. In closing, I'm definitely going to keep working on this style. If you like this video, let me know. Maybe I'll make a part 2 where I get some fake skin out and actually try something a little bit harder. But I have a few other styles that I really want to dive into and try my hand at. Comment below if you have any feedback on this video. I would love some constructive feedback about my drawing. Any thoughts you have, any other tips for other people who are trying to learn, give it a like, subscribe, check out my website. I've got my Procreate brush set for traditional tattoo art on there, paper textures, I've got free stuff. I'll be adding a bunch more on there. I've got some merch. I'm designing a bunch of that in the future, and I've got my music on there if you want to check out my music. It's on Spotify, whatever, just look up Benson Carter. That's my plug for myself for today. Thank you very much. I'm wishing you all the best on your creative endeavors. Go make something awesome.